Dromaeosaurs are pretty close to undisputed in the cool dinosaur department, but many look at the films and are often underwhelmed when they see the real-life counterpart. But some are even more formidable than they were in the movies when we look at the more underrated raptors, especially in the context of their environment. So let's take a look at one such example, Achillobator. Back in 1989, an expedition to the Gobi Desert unearthed an impressive amount of material from a very large dromaeosaur, comprising of a partial skull, a nearly complete pelvic girdle, most of the entire spine and tail, partial forelimbs, and most of the legs. Despite the impressive amount of preservation, this wasn't described for another 10 years when, in 1999, a new dinosaur was named, Achillobator giganticus, very roughly translating to the giant hero Achilles. Now, some doubt was cast on this, with some paleontologists calling this a chimera. Many elements of this animal showed some very uncharacteristic robustness for a dromaeosaur, so it's understandable, but it was settled that this was a single animal given the excellent level of articulation it was found in. But we need to take a look at what made this guy so strange. Achillobator was a dromaeosaur very closely related to another formidable member of this family, Utahraptor, whose intimidating nature I've already gone into here. As such, this dinosaur had a fairly typical dromaeosaur skull that was deeper and more robust like those of Utahraptor or Deinonychus, rather than longer and slender like Velociraptor or Ostroraptor. In fact, the skull is considered quite a bit larger for its size than most theropods, hinting at something I'll get into soon enough. The teeth were recurved and serrated like most carnivorous dinosaurs and helped to accommodate a fairly powerful bite force for a dromaeosaur. Moving along the body, it matches the skull in its robustness and stockiness. The forelimbs were long and three-clawed like other dromaeosaurs, and the tail was also typical in being long and stiffened by interlocking vertebrae. Once we hit the legs, however, we see a femur that was actually longer than the tibia, which is an unusual trait for a dromaeosaur. For those who have watched my video on dinosaur speed, you know that the opposite on a digitigrade animal is often a sign of speed. So it would appear that Achillobator was actually kind of slow for a dromaeosaur, making up for it in other ways. The pubic boot also stuck out, both figuratively and literally, as it was relatively large and protruded more forwards like other saurischian dinosaurs, unlike other members of its family who began to show a more backwards protrusion like that of modern birds. The bones of the legs from the hips all the way down to the toes were also very thick and stocky, accommodating large powerful muscles that might not have accommodated speed, but rather jumping and a very powerful grip with its characteristic sickle-shaped toe claw. Achillobator was also one of the largest dromaeosaurs known, at between 4 to 5 meters or 13 to 16 feet long, and weighing up to 350 kilograms or 770 pounds. I'm also not going to labour this point considering how many raptor videos I've done, but it was also nearly definitely feathered. So being big and being adapted for an animal that it doesn't need to be particularly fast for, but might need to jump height for, I'm guessing by the title of this video you know where I'm going with this. But don't get me wrong, Achillobator was still a fast animal that you couldn't outrun, with those powerful muscles still accommodating a decent speed. But the ratio of these bones suggests something that isn't as mechanically favourable for speed as other raptors, at least not for extended periods of time. So this raises the question of how it hunted. But first we need to bear in mind just why it was living the way it was by having a look at its environment. Achillobator was found in the Bayan Shire Formation, which dates to between roughly 96 to 89 million years ago. This area at the time fluctuated seasonally between humid to semi-arid and was rich in intertwined large meandering river systems as well as an abundant number of lakes. It was also rich in stretches of angiosperm forests, with many fossilised fruits being found in this deposit. The fauna here consisted of freshwater fish, small mammals and reptiles such as various turtles and crocodilians. But like anywhere in the world during the Cretaceous, this area was dominated by dinosaurs and pterosaurs. Not much has been found in terms of pterosaur bones, but a good amount of trace fossils have been found to have been consistent with them, as well as a few indeterminate astarchids. The herbivores here consisted of ankylosaurs such as Tulaururus and Sagantigia, neoceratopsians such as Graciloceratops, hadrosaurs like Gobihadros, several yet to be described ornithomimosaurs on top of Garudimimus, a pachycephalosaur named Amtocephale, and sauropods like Ugueto and several other unnamed members. But dominating the terrestrial land vertebrates here were the therizinosaurs, making up most of the dinosaur material here. These included Enigmosaurus, Allocosaurus, Segnosaurus, and 2 other unnamed therizinosaurs. Now, none of these were even near the size of Therizinosaurus itself, but these were not small animals, with Segnosaurus reaching lengths of around 6 to 7 meters or 20 to 23 feet. Let's also not forget the sauropod Ugueto, which wasn't the biggest for a sauropod, but it's still a freaking sauropod. Sounds like an all-you-can-eat buffet for Achillobator, especially when you consider the fact that the only other predator that is potentially associated with this formation was a medium-sized tyrannosaur known as Electrosaurus. Electrosaurus had a slight size advantage over Achillobator, but not by a lot, at between 5 to 6 meters or 16 to 20 feet long, and a much more approximate weight estimate of between 454 to 907 kilograms or 1,001 to 2,000 pounds. Now, despite having the weight advantage, Electrosaurus was actually very leggy and built for more pursuit speed. On top of this, Electrosaurus has been primarily found in the Iren Dabasu formation, which does correlate with the Bay and Shire formation, but has only been potentially found in the latter. In other words, it's likely that Electrosaurus inhabited this area too, but we don't see a huge amount of abundance in this particular formation. Now, of course, this could be down to preservational bias, but it still leaves only two scenarios. Either one, Achillobator had its pick of the area, or two, they both hunted different prey, with Electrosaurus chasing down faster prey and Achillobator going for something slower and more sturdy. Which brings us back to lifestyle. Again, everything points to Achillobator being similar to Utahraptor in that it's more pro wrestler than Olympic runner, being built with the capability of taking down some very large prey items. Now, like I mentioned in my dromaeosaur video, the sickle toe claws likely originated as tree climbing tools, but soon became adapted for something more aggressive for members that were too big to climb. These were strongest when gripping rather than slashing, much like the talons of modern birds of prey. Using this death grip and powerful bite as shown by the robust maxilla, Achillobator was likely capable of taking down the various therizinosaurs and hadrosaurs of the region, most of which were very beefy animals.
But Ryan, remember what you promised in the title?
Well, Achillobator was likely capable of hunting down these therizinosaurs or hadrosaurs on its own, but I haven't even mentioned pack hunting yet. Now, no direct evidence has been found of Achillobator showcasing pack behaviour as of recording this video, but let's think outside the box a little here. Remember, Achillobator has an extremely close relationship with Utahraptor, who by the looks of things holds a strong possibility of being a pack hunter. Now, the behaviour of pack hunting, or any gregarious behaviour for that matter, is something that can vary hugely between relatives. Hell, even within the same genus. But it does seem to be quite the coincidence that, just like Utahraptor, Achillobator also inhabits an environment filled with modestly sized dinosaurs with next to no competition. Now, it's a bit of a stretch to say that this dinosaur hunted in packs for definite, but there is as much evidence to say that it did as there is to say that it didn't. If it did hunt in packs, sauropods such as Ugueto would most certainly have to have been careful, especially if it was on the smaller side, since modern pack hunters are sometimes observed taking down prey items up to 10 times their own individual body weight. Now, if you think Ugueto might be a stretch, remember that other unnamed sauropod remains have been found here, some of which appear fully grown but smaller than Ugueto. So there might not be direct evidence, but conjecturally I think it is absolutely possible that we have another dromaeosaur here that could take down a modestly sized sauropod. Let me know down in the comments below if you think I'm a revolutionary thinker or just some mouth-breathing fanboy, whilst I answer today's question, which comes from patron Dimitris Moratidis. I'm getting better at pronunciation, I think. Who has asked, how quick was the decimation of dinosaurs after the KPG extinction event? Was it months, years, decades? Could it have been tens or hundreds or thousands of years? At what point does the resolution of the fossil record betray us? What exactly is the resolution of those timescales? Is it possible that some smaller species survived even for a few million years in a jungle setting or other type of biome which yields a poor chance of fossilization, and we could never find that out? Yes, absolutely. The resolution of the fossil record does get worse and worse the further back we go. And even with carbon dating, the margin for error for this can be thousands of years or, on the odd occasion, 1 million or 2 years. But there is a very stark line in which non-avian dinosaurs just stop, especially in the USA. But no two rock layers have the same window of time in which they were laid in. A few inches of sediment could have been laid down over tens of thousands of years if the conditions are calm enough, or it could be several meters high for a single tsunami event. so we really can't measure with a literal ruler how much time went by. Rock layers are also so deformed that it's impossible to know if two layers in different parts of the world happened within the same century as each other. So in theory, you could have a dinosaur-rich layer that was deposited several years after the asteroid hit if it's far enough from the Gulf of Mexico. So we kind of have to go by logic here instead. Anything within 100 miles of the impact was screwed almost instantly. But it did take some time for the effects to be felt elsewhere. The main killer from this asteroid, if we're talking long term, was the dust thrown into the atmosphere. It was enough to block out the sun, bringing on an impact winter, along with the sulfur causing acid rain to fall continuously over the entire planet. Now, the acid rain affected things, especially in the ocean, but the lack of sunlight knocked out the very bottom Jenga block of the entire worldwide trophic system. With nothing to photosynthesize, many of the main energy providers of these systems, such as the plants on land or algae in the oceans, essentially starved to death. With nothing now feeding the herbivores, especially big ones that need more calories, they then started dying off, which eventually cuts off the carnivore's food source. Eventually you're left with the remaining 25% of life that's no bigger than a house cat, small enough to tough out the period of low resources and generalist enough to get their food almost anywhere. As to how long this lasted, this could have been up to maybe 100 years before we see the very last non-avian dinosaurs die out. As for the smaller dinosaurs, I would say it's possible, but again, they would have to be very, very good generalists as well. The problems dinosaurs had was that they were a victim of their own success, and there weren't too many of those left outside of birds, hence why the underdog mammals fared much better. I mean, who knows, if this happened much earlier in dinosaurs' story, maybe they might have survived. So no, it didn't all happen in one day, and it took several years for the last of the non-avian dinosaurs to finally kick the bucket. But in terms of an extinction event, this might as well be instantaneous. Also, yes, smaller dinosaurs might have survived for longer and simply weren't preserved, since fossilization is actually incredibly rare for a vertebrate, especially on land, but there just wasn't as many small enough dinosaurs around that far into the Cretaceous. Anyway, I hope that's answered your question. Thank you so much for submitting it and also for your patronage. It really does mean a lot, and that goes to all the other patrons as well. It also means a lot from everyone else that you've watched this far into the video, so thank you for that. Please consider liking and subscribing, and I will catch you guys next time.